Hello, YouTube. Take 4. This is going to be somewhat impromptu. I've tried several times to sort of stay focused, and um, sometimes I'm going to stray off and mix words, perhaps, definitely going to mispronounce names and phrases. But this presentation is ultimately dedicated to those who are covering the Palestinian conflict. I began my deep dive into it on October 7th, 2023, pretty much dedicated day and night to study, watching historical documentaries, reading through United Nations records, ICC, ICJ, U.S. State Department history, CIA history, Mossad history, Holocaust scholars' writings. I really wanted to anchor myself beyond personal opinion because I do believe there is a difference between opinion and fact, and just simply being a custodian of facts. And it's my feeling that ethics, principles, morals are not subjective, that they are universal and objective. And ultimately, this first video is going to be a list of gratitude and acknowledgement of people, places, events within the Palestinian conflict. And I want to read, it's a pretty long list, so bear with me. And I'm going to try and make it as casual as I can so that your interest is ultimately carried along with some curiosity and a quest for understanding deeper, and hopefully some of these names and events will provide that for you. So to begin with, when I began my deep dive, Noam Chomsky was an incredible intellectual wizard of sorts, as far as I'm concerned, which then led me to other giants in this field that basically have thrown away their public personas, per se, their professional reputations, at least in the status quo, to dedicate to themselves and to others in the world their sense of truth and what they know to be factually ethical and unbiased in morality and in principles. So Chomsky led me into Norm Finkelstein, another incredibly sort of haunted man, I feel. He is an extraordinary warrior who, in some regards, I feel has been wrecked, which I can kind of relate to. I've also had a mind, I would say, compared to Norm, not that I'm comparing myself in any stretch of the imagination to him, but I'm just saying, in the sense of it, of this conflict's effect upon me, Norm seems to have been totaled and then somehow resurrected himself to carry on having a voice in this field. And I've just had maybe, a little ding on my door from someone who was carelessly impatient in opening theirs too close to mine. But nonetheless, the dent is there for me, and it's really changed my life. For the better or worse, that's not really for me to categorize in either or of those. It's I guess it's a little bit of both. Finkelstein led me into John Mearsheimer, not in that order. If you study Chomsky and Finkelstein, they'll refer to various people within their field, their colleagues, their heroes, and I would take notes while listening to their dialogues. John Mearsheimer is a realist. He is a political analyst, not so much a humanist or I would say an activist like Chomsky and Finkelstein, but more of a sort of behind the scenes author, interviewer, commenter, and still an extraordinary human being and just laying out the raw data. I do have some disagreements with his realist approach, but maybe that's for another time. Ilan Pappé, Gideon Levy, Mohammed Marandi is another commenter I would highly recommend. Gabor Mate, Owen Jones, a shout out to Owen for your extraordinary work. I hope to dedicate an episode just simply maybe reacting to one of your compilations, or who knows, someday having an interview or some kind of meeting to hear your thoughts and further the cause in understanding all that's going on for the Palestinians and also for the Israelis as well. I find that they're in a very dissonant place. I acknowledge that. Further down the line, Bassem Youssef, Associated Foreign Press, for both their coverage, but mostly for their photography that I've used extensively, and credited them, of course, on my Substack page. Getty Images as well for photography. Hassan Omar, actually it's Hassan Amar, for photography. And going from there into this, just a note that this list is somewhat mixed. So there's no specific category of thanks or gratitude to, say, journalists, photographers, doctors, nurses. They're somewhat mixed in, which I think in hindsight makes sense, considering the state of Gaza these days. You round one corner and you assume a certain context, and then within that context, you see something that would never be there in ordinary day-to-day life. So I think somehow this list sort of put itself together in a way that symbolizes what Gaza is right now. An amalgamation of the obvious and then the not so obvious, the things that you would never expect to surprise you, then do. So my pronunciation is going to wreck some of these words, and please pardon me. I'm going to wreck some of these words, but I'm going to get them across the best I can. So Haneen Jama, she was a little girl that had called the emergency hotline while sitting in a car that had just been struck by the IDF. I won't go deep into her story right now. I just want to put it out there that her story is worth looking into. Nabil Kohel, who died because his cancer treatment was blocked by the IDF. A little boy, I think he was around 6 or 7 years old. Samar Ilouf, a Gaza journalist. Miko Pelad, an activist. Martin Love, he's deceased and was a writer that contributed. Mandel Negan, he's a photographer that contributed to Associated Foreign Press and Getty Images. Saul Loeb, a photographer. Joseph Oland, an artist who I used some of his permitted assets also in my Substack postings. Rashid Hussan Maham, I'm going to say that again. Rashid Hussan Mahmoud, a Palestinian poet. Anel Shiline, thank you, Anel, for resigning from the State Department, the U.S. State Department, over Gaza. Your bravery adds to all of us that are trying our best to do the right thing and still help ourselves with the day-to-day. A huge thanks to the Electronic Intifada. I can't express in this video my gratitude to all of you and what you've been through, both having your home ransacked a bit and being put in prison, threatened from time to time by the status quo. John Elmer, James Elder, who they've had on their show, a UNICEF spokesman, Patrick Strickland with the Electronic Intifada, Abby Martin, Asa Winstonley, Ali Abunima, Maureen Murphy, Nora Friedman, Michael Brown, David Cronin, Tamara Nasser. All the journalists and writers, contributors to the Electronic Intifada, thank you. Rania Khalik, a journalist. Ines Khalil. Ines was another child, 5 years old, killed in Gaza. I want to thoroughly thank Al Jazeera for your bravery. It would take me an entire hour to go through all that I've experienced and how your non-propagandist approach to presenting this coverage, or your coverage, I should say, has strengthened my resolve and my approach. Reuters, AP News, Majdi Fatih, a Gaza photographer, Saleh Gamil, a protester and writer, John Kaka, reporter. So John Taka Reporter is a YouTube channel, and I highly recommend it. It's spelled Jantaka, Reporter. Events and places I'd like to give thanks. Al-Aqsa flood. Nothing more to say there. Gaza, Khan Yunis, Jenin, the West Bank, Lebanon, Yemen, Nusrat, Rafah, the Nazarene corridor, Jabalia, Ramallah, Deir el-Balah refugee camp. There are many more places, and my apologies for not listing them all. It's a long list, and I'm trying to. Basically, I took these from my notes, things that I've written in the margin. So, yes, I want to acknowledge those. And going further here, Dalia Hadar, interviewer, author. This is going to be an odd one, but I'm going to thank Albert Einstein not for his genius, but for his common sense. He wrote a lot around his thoughts of this is pre-1948, when the idea of Israel was sort of being hashed out and floated around within the scholar circles and political circles, and he was definitely not fond of the idea whatsoever. But reading his commentary and sort of pragmatic approach was actually kind of surprising and refreshing. Rachel Corrie, rest in peace. She was an early protester that was murdered by an IDF bulldozer driver as she was protesting the collective punishment demolition of homes in Palestine. Recognition to buildings, which I feel are, in a sense, living beings in some respects. Al-Najjar Hospital, Al-Aqsa Hospital, Kamal Adwan Hospital, Sujaya, the town of Sujaya. Back to People, Sami Hamadi, he's an activist on Instagram. Adila Hassim, a South African lawyer and activist. Phyllis Bennis. And Hassan Piker, I would like to also thank him for his resilience and guidance of the younger generation and the old, and for him embracing a kind of what I would consider to be a homegrown sort of journalism, but more commentary, but more personal in that emotions are allowed and not necessarily opinions. He presents things in a common sense fashion, and has flavorings and volume to add, but it doesn't necessarily change the truth. So thanking him and all those that support his podcasts. No congrats, though, to the United Nations, the ICC, and ICJ. I have to acknowledge that, yes, you do produce positive, what some might call propaganda, but being that the way the UN is set up, where it has to be unanimous voting to pass anything, and of course the USA is always vetoing. There's no way to get a majority without everyone. It's basically a self-sabotaged union of countries. In a sense, it was created after World War II, and I don't really view it any differently than NATO, ultimately, in the sense that it just serves as a sort of a symbolic union of countries, and with no ability to enforce, including the ICC and ICJ, they have no enforcement capabilities. They can't just come onto a sovereign country and arrest. They have no enforcement. And if you do look at their record of who they have arrested, you'll see further what I mean by more bent towards supporting the G7 than actually supporting humanity at large and in real pragmatic results. Ken Kleppenstein, Abu Bakr Abed, a Gaza reporter that also works with Electronic Intifada. Mehdi Hassan, an interviewer, activist, broadcaster, extraordinarily energetic and truthful. I want to thank and give praise and gratitude to the Gaza medics, the Gaza doctors and nurses, the photographers, the journalists, the Gazan ancestors, the children, the elders, the parents, the sons and daughters, both alive, under the rubble, in IDF prisons, being held as hostages, what mainstream media call prisoners, what we know in the field of truly studying this subject are under administrative detention, held without trial, no convictions, simply detained. Those are hostages, 10,000 plus, including thousands that have gone missing, most likely in unmarked graves inside Israel, maybe outside of Israel, who knows. Back to people in the sense of individuals who have contributed to my research. Asel Musa, a Gaza journalist, Maha Husani, another journalist in Gaza, Rania Khalik. I want to acknowledge the Sabra massacre, the Shantil massacre, both more old than the current massacres, like the Flower Massacre, and the massacre that occurred not long ago in a protest in Gaza, where the IDF shot people down through a fence, basically. I want to thank Eye on Palestine. They're an Instagram presenter, extraordinary footage. Not for the faint of heart, though. A little more coarse, a lot more coarse than Al Jazeera. But worth knowing that they exist. So again, that's EYE on Palestine. Mutaz Obiat, released from IDF prison. Worth looking into his story. His first name spelled Moazaz, Obayat. The Lancet, for their study in how many people have most likely died in this modern-day genocide in ancient Palestine. The number is up near 45,000, maybe 50,000, but they estimate that it's possibly 5 times that, maybe 6. All things considered, they did a deep dive into those missing, the neighborhoods, the collapsed buildings, and so on. Gaza is literally a mausoleum right now. It's beyond words. Sana Saeed, a critic, Marwan Bashara, the Chris Hedges report, Danny Haifong, a journalist, a YouTuber, Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac, Doctors Without Borders, UNRWA, Mido Halimi, Brian Taylor Cohen, Abdel Karim Hanna, UNIFIL, and the Irish who are standing up to the IDF in Lebanon. They have a relationship with Palestinians, all things considered, with Britain's relationship with Ireland ancestrally, and that part of Ireland is still occupied by Britain. Ta-Nehisi Coates, Naomi Klein, Giannis Varoufakis, Azam Tamimi, Alistair Crook, Arun Hadi Roy, Karim Khan of the ICC, Francesca Albanese, Ahmed Hashim Abu Nasser, a Gaza doctor, Saleh Al-Jafara, Claire Daly, Madeleine Norman, Kaleem Hawa, Nasreen Abd Allah, an activist, Chris McGreal, a writer and reporter, Wafa News Agency, WAFA, Mondoweiss, Riham Ishnera. I'm gonna spell her name because her story is pretty extraordinary, and it's all been inhumane as far as I'm concerned. But her story seems to have really triggered many people in a special way for some reason. Everything triggers me. You know, whether the person is a 5-year-old or a 55-year-old or someone who's famous or infamous or unknown, even simply considering them, it's all the same to me in the sense of just deep remorse and disappointment that I naively belong citizen-wise to a country that has been doing this for ultimately centuries. I mean, I've known that, but I think something unfolding in modern day, I'll get into this later, that simply demonstrates a pathological expression of a neurosis that was basically exported from Europe onto what was then Turtle Island, which is now North America. It's. I don't mean this in a condescending way, but it is embarrassing on a soul level, more so than anything. Not on a persona level. Just simply finding myself in an American epidermis. So her name, Reham Ishneiwra. She was a molecular geneticist working on water purification. She was basically murdered by the IDF for, along with many other professors, journalists, doctors, lawyers, taken out for the sake of deconstructing Palestinian society. Tanya Haj Hassan, a Gaza doctor with pediatrics. The Oxford Union, Mahmoud Al-Madhoun, OUN. He was part of a Gaza soup kitchen. Another extraordinary story. He was sniped by what I believe, if I recall correctly, an IDF drone or an IDF sniper, walking in the middle of the street in the morning time, I believe. Marine Vlahovic, a French journalist, Vlahovic, worth looking into her story. Hage Mater, EMC News, Amnesty International, Abdallah El Hajj, with UNRWA and a photographer, Omar Badr, Peter Beinart, Abu Bakr Abed, Michael Brooks, George Galloway, Susan Abluhawa, university protesters. I want to thank you all for your commitment and your bravery and your steadfast. Please keep pressing, if anything, for the sake of your sense of self and whatever that does, whatever bit that it adds to a solution in the future. You are not alone. Omer Bartov, a Holocaust historian, Dr. Ghassan Abu Sittah, plastic surgeon that worked in Gaza, Salah Jahin, the Egyptian poet, Ahmed Eid, Shrouk Allah, Fernando Murillo, Mahmoud Hams, Fatima Shaber, Mustafa Hassuna, Alan Hadid, Rafat Alarir, Amy Goodman, and Democracy Now! Amy Goodman and Democracy Now!, along with Noam Chomsky, and many more, they played a formidable role in my early, like my first 3 or 4 months of research and building a foundation. Her coverage still remains to this day unrelenting and solid, just simply solid, extraordinary human being. I'm going to end this video in this list with a poem by Rifat Alarir. He was killed in Gaza, and he was a very famous poet. I'm sure if you're familiar with this conflict, you've heard this before, and I feel like it's a fitting poem to end with. Before I read this, I want to thank you all for your time here. There's details around what else I do in the description below. Ultimately, I want to end the video with the poem and no plugs or anything like that. Just simply end with this poem. And thank you all again for watching and considering a greater picture of all that's going on than one's reactionary synthesis. Not that a true synthesis could be knitted together through a collection of reactions, but simply what's perceived as a sound opinion often comes from simply the weight of hundreds of opinions that have not been proven wrong, that just simply get stored in a closet, reinforcing that, the collection is real, but nothing is real in the collection. It's kind of a an ironic situation. So here's the poem he wrote. If I must die, you must live to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings. Make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze, and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope. Let it be a story.